There's nothing like seeing an old friend twice within the span of 2 weeks. We're back to Raleigh to see Nikolai Ehlers and the Carolina Hurricanes once again.
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. More than anything, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, lots to chat about. Winnipeg is going to Carolina for a rematch in Raleigh against the Carolina Hurricanes and Nikolai Ehlers. Last game didn't go too badly. The Jets actually, I thought, played pretty dang well against the Canes, but couldn't quite get the result. And after the really humbling loss against the Washington Capitals earlier this week, I'm sure Winnipeg would love to just have something to feel better about. Not exactly great feelings with the Jets right now. But if you're somebody who's thinking a little bit more about the future because maybe the season doesn't feel that inspiring, I also want to go through some prospect updates, see how the kids are doing, and chat about that. But first, let's talk about Winnipeg versus Carolina. If you're hoping for a note of confidence, the Canes themselves haven't exactly been playing that well recently. They've lost their last two games, both against the Sabres and the New York Rangers. Must be something in New York. Winnipeg doesn't quite have the New York home advantage, so I don't know if this really counts. But hey, after the Jets game against them last week, I thought Winnipeg actually played well and acquitted itself against a pretty dangerous team, which is why I thought maybe, you go into Washington, you put on a decent 5v5 performance, you feel better about that. Well, yeah, we all know how the Caps game went. So, Canes, let's see what they're going with, right? So, this is being recorded a day or two before we see them. The lines are likely to change again, especially because Jordan Staal actually missed the game against the Rangers with illness. There's a chance he may be back for this one. But up front, we'll have Svech, Aho, and Jarvis. Jarvis, please come to Winnipeg. I don't care. Whatever happens, please just come to Winnipeg, dude. We need Seth Jarvis, just so badly. The dude is awesome. He's, a local kid. Get Seth Jarvis to Winnipeg. I don't care how. Second line, you've got our old friend Ehlers, Stankoven, and Blake. This trio has been cooking recently, and Ehlers continues to start hitting pay dirt more and more frequently. On the third line, you have Carrier, Robida, or Staal, whoever's healthy, and Martinuk. And then on the fourth line, Hall, Jankowski, and Robinson. In the back end, you've got Miller and Walker, Gostisbehere and Chatfield, and Nikishin and Nystrom. Now, I thought from the back end, they actually played pretty sloppily when they were in Winnipeg. The defense had a lot of turnovers, and I thought the Jets were actually pretty close to getting at least a goal or two against Cucci, but apparently it didn't happen. So, against Bussy, but unfortunately it didn't quite work out that way. So, going to be an interesting one. I think we could see Anderson instead of Bussy. Bussy was probably the one that you would want to score on, and the Jets did get, 3 goals against him? But unfortunately, it just wasn't quite enough. So the Jets now have a tougher task trying to win on the road here. And Carolina, going to be an interesting one, right? I think this Canes team has nice home ice advantage. I think after their own recent defeats in New York, they're going to be pretty pissed off. And the Jets just don't really seem to be in a great spot right now. Obviously, this is being recorded before we see what Friday's lines are, but I don't even know what combinations Arniel can come up with short of splitting the top line. And if he does, the top line is probably one of the only ones that you can, comfortably rely upon to score. So you are risking perhaps losing offense in other areas, which I've seen some arguments on Twitter for. But at some point, you've got to do something, right? This team is just simply not good enough. They have not played particularly well. We really aren't seeing any goal scoring coming from anyone that's not Connor Scheifele or Velarde. And it's just grim. I mean, it really is. Winnipeg can play as well as it wants to at 5v5, but unless anyone scores, it really doesn't mean anything. I like the process, and I think, saying it doesn't mean anything is maybe a little bit harsh and probably hyperbolic, but I just think there's a certain level of frustration because a lot of what we thought could happen with this team is starting to catch up. This squad doesn't have a lot of finishing talent. We kind of knew that would be a problem, and it's coming true. Great. Awesome. Could have told you that. Taves, not really working out. He's provided some points here and there, but not a lot of production. Nyquist has kind of been washed. Pearson's really not been able to do much. This team just feels like it brought in a lot of help, and none of it's really helping. So here we are. We've got Nemesnikov at 2C again for the time being, unless they make a change again heading into this game. And I'm just kind of throwing my hands up at this point. If they win, awesome. But if they don't, it's just another mark in, Chevy's ledger that he really struggled with this offseason and didn't get this team the help it deserved. It's a shame. But, I think if there's any solace to take out of this, it's that if the Jets continue to drop points in games like this, there is a real chance that by March we are looking more at a seller situation. And, Winnipeg could frankly use more assets in its prospect pool. I think if they can find a way to get a nice prospect at the draft that might be a little more imminent, you could kind of retool on the fly. I think Winnipeg really needs to think about that for the future and present, but, one game at a time, I suppose. For this one, I guess I'll come up with a score prediction. I'm going 4-2 Canes. I think if Anderson's in goal, we should probably see an improved performance over Bussey, although Anderson wasn't great in his last start, so, does it really matter? I don't know. I'm starting to feel, some exasperation with the squad, but the Jets just aren't finishing. I don't know what else to do about it. They really aren't. I do think Salomonson has a chance to play again. Obviously his first game was on the rougher side and probably not one that he's going to love in a lot of respects, but until there's a better option, he's just going to have to play and hopefully work through it, right? The only way that I think he can get comfortable at the NHL level is just by getting minutes. That's all you can really say. And it's not like there's many other options, because if he doesn't play, well, you're probably bringing in Luke Shen again. And we all kind of know that Shen hasn't exactly been great himself. So really feels like we're kind of digging at the bottom of the barrel now. I think that's just the general feeling I have. And unlike last year, where it felt like when you went through a bad stretch, you could kind of claw out of it pretty quickly, this team just doesn't feel like that turnaround's coming. There's no help. I don't see where the turnaround is coming until Chevy does something. So all I can say is good luck to the boys. If we see Milic in this game, that would be very interesting. Comrie has been okay in my mind, but I don't think he's really been able to save all that much. And at this point, throwing Milic in there probably doesn't change the arithmetic very much. But if he has a good game, that'd be nice, right? Otherwise, Comrie, good luck to you, bud. We appreciate his services, and he's tried his best, but the team in front of him isn't scoring, so it doesn't really matter, even if he did make a few extra saves. I don't know, man. I just kind of feel like I'm hitting my head against a wall and not really sure what to think about this team anymore. But, it is what it is. We thought that this could be a situation where the team took a step back this year. The step back's been a little bit bigger than anticipated thanks to some injuries. And here we are now kind of needing a bit of a must-win just to feel at least something for this season. But more than likely, we're probably looking at a 12-11 record coming out of this game. So give me your score predictions below. Let me know in the comments or at my social media at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. I want to talk a little bit more about the inspiring parts now. Let's chat about the Jets prospects, because some of them have really been impressing. Coming right up in just a brief moment. Let's be honest, most of us can't name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch can help you organize your accounts and spending, whether it's subscription services or just daily purchases. If you're spending more on food than you realize, Monarch can help you track that spending give you suggestions on how to trim that down, and identify what you need to do to meet your financial goals. If you have an investment portfolio, it can help you show trends and give you data visualization of investment performances so you know what you're actually getting out of what you're putting in. And if you have a partner or a spouse, you can even have a shared account so you'll always be able to set objectives together and stay on the same page. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcasting network. Thanks for joining us in tonight's episode as we are trying to offer a little bit of light in a proverbial sea of darkness right now for the Winnipeg Jets. Things haven't felt great, and I'm sure a lot of us are getting angsty. You know, the Jets are frustrating. The team's not playing well. Players are starting to sound like they're kind of pissed off. And, you know, I think a lot of us are just kind of a little bit at the end, right? Not because this team is the worst team in the world, but because we've been down this road before. We know where it goes. And we know that at some point we have to start thinking about the future of this team as the core starts to age out. Luckily for the Jets, even though the prospect pool is kind of limited, we are seeing some bright spots. The first guy I want to really highlight is Victor Klingzel. Klingzel obviously is one of the more intriguing talents because he was a late round pick who has a very high offensive motor, but at the time was criticized for doing a lot of it from the perimeter. You know, this is a guy who's a very playmaking oriented player, a winger who tends to pass first, which is not the worst thing in the world, but you know, again, from the perimeter, right? Not attacking the slot, not getting between the face-off circles, operating in spaces that are not usually high leverage for offense in the NHL. Well, this year, of course, he just kind of ripped up the U20s with Skellefteå and put up 29 points in 16 games, including 11 goals. And look, it is the U20s, so that's not exactly going to be the most impressive on the face of it. But usually you don't really see 18-year-olds doing this in the U20s. Like, there's just not many kids performing at this level in Sweden. So he's actually been promoted to the adult league. He's with Skellefteå proper and already has a goal in 3 games. Now, it'll be interesting to see how his production tracks over the course of the season and if he stays with the adult club. I think, you know, already scoring a goal in your first 3 games in Sweden where, you know, youth deployment isn't always prioritized is really impressive. Victor is one of those kids that has really risen up the Jets prospect pools, and I don't see that many people talking about it. I think that there's been some overlooking of him just because, you know, he's playing in a league that people haven't really been able to watch that much of. Swedish U20s, not highly regarded, but at some point, you just also have to look at the raw production and realize he's put up almost 2 points per game before moving to the adult league and already has a goal in the adult league. This kid might be special. You know, as a 5th round pick, it was already, you know, a bit of just a home run kind of swing. And he's got tons of extremely creative tools, great vision and passing. If he really starts to grow his game and become an elite offensive threat, the Jets might have gotten an absolute steal in the 5th round. So, Klingzel, keep an eye out for him. He's our young, grittying king. I kid you not, he actually has gritted after he scored. That's so cursed, but I guess we'll take it. But yeah, you know what? If you're looking for something fun, I think that could be very intriguing. On the other side of things, you have Alphonse Frey, who's been with Timrå, also in the adult Swedish league. He has no points in 21 games, which I thought was a little unusual. I'd like to know what his deployments are like. But for a guy who I thought was really hailed as being offensively creative, even if a bit raw, you know, 0 points in 21 games is slightly disconcerting. I think for a young puck-moving D, you'd like to see that production be a little bit higher. Again, I don't know if it's a deployment issue, if maybe he's really focusing on the defensive side of things, or if Timrå's offense is just not that prolific. All of these things are technically possible and wouldn't shock me. But, you know, you see a lot of guys on that team like Jonathan Dahlin and Emil Pettersson doing reasonably well. A little odd that he has like no points. And it's not like he's the only defender on that team who's got no points. A lot of their blue line has maybe 1 or 0 points. So not exactly, you know, lighting the lamp, it seems, for a lot of their blue line. But again, for a kid who I thought was supposed to be a bigger part of their offense, it is a little funky that he's got nothing so far. But again, not too worried about it. He's a young, 19, 20-year-old kid. He's got time to develop, and the Jets have already brought him in for his ELC. So, let's not get too hasty just yet. He's exciting, he's young, and he's sorting things out. And hopefully, over the course of the season, he'll start lighting the lamp. His fellow countryman, Elias Salamanson, obviously just got called up and played his first NHL game and is likely to play again against the Canes unless he sits for Shen. The Salamanson season with the Moose has been not great to start the year, 6 points in 17 games. And from what I was watching of him, especially in the early part of the season, the Manitoba lack of organization and communication led to a lot of chaotic moments where I thought he just could not figure out what was going on. Sort of felt like, that team's offense and defensive structure were all over the place. And I kind of felt like he was struggling to kind of get on the same page with guys. He's a really smart player and had a fantastic season last year. So I would not read into his struggles early on in the season. I just hope that if he plays more NHL games, that he gets some confidence and feels good about his production and starts to really translate that to some real success with the Moose this year. So all the best to Elias. I think he's had a solid start to his North American career. Just hope that he continues it. Elsewhere, obviously David Gustafsson has been doing pretty well with Manitoba. Not really shocked there, 11 points in 18 games. I continue to think that he is really underappreciated and underrated in Winnipeg's pool. Gus is, for me, one of those players that feels like a what could have been moment with the Jets. I still wonder if he could have been maybe more of a 2C for Winnipeg, and they just never really gave him the chance to sort it out. They always put him in a fourth-line grindy role, and that's not where I think his game naturally trended. I think he's got the smarts to be a higher-level player, and Winnipeg just hasn't really let themselves find that out. So if he continues to light the lamp and be a really effective force for the Moose, I wonder if somebody approaches the Jets about acquiring him. Again, he's 24, 25, so he's not super young, but he's a guy that I think has more tools and more to offer a team if they're actually smart. I think he's one of those guys where you look at his production at other levels and you think to yourself, there is something more to his game, and you really want to give him a shot. This is going to be a little bit of the Swedish hour. So Sasha Boumedienne, if you're wondering, has been pretty darn solid for Boston. 6 points in 14 games and generally playing in the top four. Obviously, Boumedienne got promoted last season as a freshman to the top pairing, which is pretty crazy. You don't ever really see that happen in college, let alone for an 18-year-old kid. Boumedienne, I think, is one of our most exciting prospects in the pool and somebody who over the next couple of years would not be shocked to see him rocket towards the top of this prospect pile. He, as of right now, kind of projects to be in that potentially Sandberg-y tier of player, which if you're a Jets fan, that's really exciting. Sandberg's one of the best defenders in the NHL, and Boumedienne potentially aligning to that level of player is nothing short of freaking awesome. So, yeah, Jet Scouts picked a good one. I'm excited about Boumedienne, and I find him to be a really, really impressive prospect. Last Swede that we'll talk about, Fabian Wagner. He has gone back down to just 1 point in 11 games. You see the flashes of offense with him. You see the skill every once in a while, but I just don't know that he's ever been able to put it together to a degree to where I feel he's going to translate to an NHLer. If he ever does make the league, it would be more in a fourth line role, but I just haven't seen enough from him to really be super excited about his offensive potential and feeling like he's going to translate to much more than maybe a fourth line guy. But maybe he does that weird thing again, or he goes on a 10-game scoring streak. You never know. Don't want to write it off, but I would say for the time being, I'm generally kind of putting him more towards the back of our pool and not thinking too much, which is a shame, right? If he's able to find that level of consistency and maybe has one of those Danny Julkin sort of comebacks, that'd be great, right? The Jets could certainly use more wing scoring depth that is skilled and energetic, but for the time being, I don't know that we're going to be seeing that anytime soon. I now want to shift focus and talk about some of our other prospects, both in the juniors, college, and AHL circuit. We'll chat about some of the North American skaters coming right up. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. And you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. If you're somebody who's a big self-professed stats nerd and thinks you know more about the NBA than somebody else, turn your knowledge into winnings. Maybe it's predicting the biggest three-point shooter of the night or who might win the league's MVP award. No matter what, FanDuel is fast, safe, and secure, and you get your winnings instantly. Right now, FanDuel is even giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcasting network. It's time to come back across the pond and return to North American hockey, checking in on NCAA, WHL, OHL, all that fun stuff. Let's check in on our kids, starting with Kieran Walton. Walton with Sudbury has been just destroying the league again, 28 points in 19 games. Last year with Sudbury, I expect him to be with the Moose at the end of the season if Sudbury's not in the playoffs. I don't think that they are likely to be a big player in the postseason. I could be wrong about that. I haven't tracked, a lot of the OHL standings recently, but Kieran has been lighting the lamp pretty frequently. He's also a very interesting player along the flanks and half walls. Got great vision in passing, and I think that tends to be something where his stick handling and passing and tape-to-tape stuff really comes off very cleanly. The mobility is really the only thing with him that I think he's still working on. That level of skating is still not quite pro-ready just yet, but, as he gets mature and starts to age into his body, I think he'll figure that part out. Kevin He, likewise, also doing really well, 23 points in 19 games, not quite scoring like 6,000 points per game like he did at the start of last year, but just being productive and good at this level is fine. Niagara has certainly benefited from his leadership and captaincy, and he has been a great productive forward who really kind of impresses with his puck smarts and his ability to sort of read those passing lanes and stuff. I thought late in camp this year, he really showed some growth and looked more confident in his last game or two. I expect him to be a really solid middle six player who becomes very quickly a bit of a fan favorite. Also, a little bit of a fun fact, but his brother also plays for Niagara, which I did not realize. I think his brother's name is Eric. So the brothers here are actually Niagara Ice Dogs. I think that's really cool. And just thought you should know that in case you didn't. Another guy that I think really has sort of popped up in my radar, and I wasn't really anticipating this, Edison Angle with Brantford has racked up 16 points in 20 games. His scoring pace has slowed a bit from that ridiculous start he had in his first 10 or 15 games in the OHL. But, don't mistake this. A rookie kid putting up those numbers, super, super impressive. And I believe Edison is actually committed to Ohio State after this year. That should be really fun, right? Ohio State's a pretty well-respected program. Edison's going to be a major player there. And I think he's got, a really good chance of being a very, very fun prospect for Winnipeg's deepening back end. I hope that he has a good year. Angle, obviously is still a very young prospect. And I think for the Jets, we just need more mobility on the back end. And with Winnipeg's blue line kind of starting to age out a little bit and maybe change composition as DeMello gets older, as Pionk gets older, players like Angle, Boumediene, these guys hopefully start to fill in those depth roles and eventually take bigger spots as our veterans move out. But Angle, really impressive. I think he could eventually become some level of NHLer. We'll just have to wait and see. Jacob Cloutier for Saginaw hasn't exactly been doing a ton offensively, 12 points in 22 games. I think he's got flashes of offense, but it'll probably take him a little bit to translate that into higher levels of pro projectability. Owen Martin kind of in a similar spot, just 6 points in 20 games. Owen obviously is very defensively responsible and maybe has maybe some like Adam Lowry traits in his game. I think the biggest thing, though, is that Adam in his lower years was actually offensively productive later in his junior days. But so I don't quite know what to read into Owen Martin's lack of offense just yet. But at least, if nothing else, he is super defensively responsible, and that is a skill that the Jets will like. Danny Shilkin, probably one of the most exciting risers in Winnipeg's pool again, 9 points in 19 games. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider what he did last year and the previous year, he has come a long way and actually looks like a solid, middle or bottom six guy again, especially on a Moose team that until recently was not scoring that much. Same with Jaeger, 19 games, 9 points. He's been really impressive for a first-year pro. I do think the Moose really should trust him more, give him more minutes, give him more shifts. He could be a player who doesn't spend that long with Manitoba, or at least I hope not. Knowing the Jets, they might overcook him, but I hope not. Now, the last guy that I think I want to talk about, obviously Barlow's out there and has had a couple of points in games, but not super noticeable. This one, though, I think is a name that's really, really worth circling. Garrett Brown. Garrett has been putting up some solid numbers, 6 points in 14 games for Denver. That is almost his entire season's production from last year, 8 points in 40 games. Garrett has been playing a pretty prime role with Denver's back end, and for a very highly respected college program, he has been an anchor on the defense and is such a smooth skating two-way blue liner with great passing. He's strong and physical, not like a super huge player, but kind of in that Sandberg mold. I think Winnipeg has found a type of blue liner that they like, and Garrett could be the right side Sandberg. I'm very excited about his potential to become, maybe a second or third pairing guy for the Jets. Winnipeg's right side is very deficient, and if the Jets can find a Sammy on that back end to anchor the other side of the defense, because the left side's very deep, that would be incredible. He is like a 6'3", almost 200-pound kid, so he's got some size, and he's a very smooth skater. I've seen some footage of him with Denver. I think he's got some real potential to be a very solid second or third pairing guy. And keep an eye out. If Denver makes the playoffs this year, he could be a really fun watch. I've enjoyed his distribution, and I think he could be something for the Jets to be a bit of a sleeper pick, right? Again, maybe not too near, but another year or so, and he might be ready to jump up to the pros. But let me know which prospects you're super excited about. Drop your most hyped kids in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at @LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. Have a great weekend. See you then. And as always, go Jets go.